In a tense courtroom, a powerful husband mocked his wife for standing alone with no lawyer by her side. He believed freezing her money had broken her spirit and ended her fight. What he did not expect was the truth hidden behind her silence. Just when the case seemed over, everything changed the day she walked into that courtroom alone. Everyone believed they were witnessing the final chapter of her defeat. But no one understood that they were actually standing at the edge of a storm that would tear through every lie ever spoken. And when she stood there without a lawyer, without visible support, without trembling hands, her husband smiled with cruel certainty, convinced that freezing her accounts, destroying her credit, isolating her from allies had crushed her spirit completely. What he failed to recognize was that silence is not surrender, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the sharpest blade. And before the judge's gavel could fall, a buried truth was already moving beneath the surface, waiting for the exact moment to rise and shatter everything. Adrian Cole sat at the defense table, wrapped in confidence, his tailored navy suit flawless, its cufflinks catching the courtroom lights, his expensive legal team arranged beside him like soldiers ready for battle. He leaned back slightly, studying Isabella with a smirk that suggested ownership rather than respect, because for years, ownership was exactly how he viewed her. He believed money built power, and power erased consequences, and he had more money than anyone else in that room. Isabella, however, stood alone, her hands steady, her expression unreadable, her simple gray dress making her appear almost fragile to those who did not know her. The spectators whispered softly, reporters shifted in their seats, eager for drama because the media had already painted this story as predictable, powerful entrepreneur versus unstable wife. Adrian had carefully engineered that narrative, leaking selective details, planting subtle doubts, and guiding public opinion with the precision of a strategist. Every bank account Isabella once accessed had been frozen, every joint investment redirected, every shared asset buried inside complex corporate layers that required armies of lawyers to untangle. He had ensured she would walk in looking powerless, and technically she was, but only on paper. The judge adjusted his glasses and asked if she had secured representation. Adrian nearly laughed out loud, anticipating her quiet admission of defeat, but Isabella calmly stated she would represent herself. A faint murmur spread through the courtroom. Adrian shook his head, pretending disappointment, but inside he felt victory tightening around him. He believed she was walking willingly into humiliation. What he did not see was the controlled breath. She took the subtle glance toward the courtroom doors and the quiet certainty in her eyes. Because this was never about standing alone. This was about timing, and Adrian Cole had just stepped into a trap he did not even know existed. Adrian allowed himself a slow, satisfied breath, believing the battle was already finished. He signaled for his lead attorney, Marcus Hale, to begin, and Marcus rose smoothly, outlining a narrative so polished it sounded rehearsed for weeks. He described Isabella as emotionally unstable, financially reckless, and incapable of managing complex assets. He presented selective emails, partial bank summaries, and carefully timed screenshots designed to suggest paranoia on her part. Every sentence was crafted to push the image of a woman unraveling under imaginary suspicions. The courtroom listened closely, some nodding subtly as if the story made sense, because on the surface it did. Adrian watched Isabella, carefully expecting a reaction, a crack in her posture, a flash of anger, something that would validate his version of her instability, but she remained still, hands folded, eyes forward, absorbing every word without interruption, which unsettled him more than he expected. When Marcus concluded by emphasizing that Adrian had generously offered a modest settlement despite her erratic behavior, a faint sound came from the back doors of the courtroom. It was not loud, but it carried weight, measured footsteps, steady, controlled, deliberate, the kind of steps that did not rush and did not hesitate. Several heads turned. Adrian frowned briefly, irritated at the distraction, until he saw the figure approaching. Tall, composed, dressed in a dark suit, with posture so straight it felt military, and in a voice calm but commanding, the man spoke, requesting permission to address the court. As a witness connected directly to the financial records being discussed, the judge raised an eyebrow, asking his name, and the man answered, Daniel Reyes, United States Navy. SEAL retired. The words shifted the atmosphere. Instantly, reporters lifted their heads. Pens ready, whispers turned sharper. Adrian felt a flicker of recognition. The name struck something distant, but he dismissed it quickly. Daniel continued, stating that he had recently obtained documentation connected to offshore transfers referenced in Marcus' statement, documentation that appeared incomplete. In the version submitted by Adrian's legal team, Marcus objected immediately, arguing irrelevance, but Daniel remained composed, explaining that the omitted sections directly impacted the legitimacy of the financial freeze placed on lease. Abela, the judge, requested preliminary review, and Daniel handed over a secure folder, thick, organized, tabbed, with precision that suggested weeks of preparation. Adrian felt tension tighten along his jaw because he recognized the formatting. Those tabs mirrored internal corporate files that were not publicly accessible, which meant someone with intimate knowledge had assembled them. Isabella finally moved, not dramatically, not triumphantly, but with quiet acknowledgement. As Daniel took a seat behind her, Adrian realized with a cold ripple of understanding that this was not coincidence, and as the judge began scanning the first pages, silence fell heavier than before, because whatever was inside that folder was strong enough to shift momentum, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, Adrian was no longer completely certain of the outcome. The judge turned page after page, his expression slowly tightening as the silence inside the courtroom thickened into something almost suffocating, and Adrian could feel the shift even before a single word was spoken, because power has a scent, and when it begins to slip, the one losing it feels the change first. Marcus attempted to maintain composure, whispering urgently to Adrian, while requesting a brief recess, but the judge raised his hand, signaling that the court would continue because what he was reading appeared directly relevant to the case. Daniel remained still, his posture disciplined, his eyes forward, not once looking at Adrian, as if emotional reactions were beneath him, and that calm unsettled Adrian more than open hostility. Ever could Isabella finally lifted her gaze not toward her husband but toward the judge, and when she spoke, her voice was steady, clear, and controlled, explaining that the documents in question were full transaction trails, including timestamps, authorization codes, and internal approval signatures that had been deliberately excluded from the earlier submission. She explained that the frozen assets had not been protected marital funds, but rather emergency reserves she had quietly established after discovering irregular transfers months earlier, transfers that redirected shared capital into shell corporations registered under aliases connected to Adrian. Through layered ownership structures, the courtroom murmured again, this time louder, reporters typing, rapidly sensing the narrative shifting from unstable wife to calculated deception. Marcus objected, arguing that the claims were speculative, but Daniel calmly requested permission to display corresponding authentication confirmations, which the judge allowed, and as certified banking verifications were presented, confirming the origin and rerouting of millions into offshore entities. The color drained subtly from Adrian's face because he recognized every transaction, every digital fingerprint, every strategic movement that he believed had been invisible. He had underestimated one critical factor. He assumed Isabella would react emotionally instead of strategically. What he never considered was that she had spent years quietly studying his methods, learning his patterns, memorizing the systems he trusted most, and when she suspected betrayal, she did not confront him. She documented him. She did not accuse, she archived. She did not panic, she prepared, and then, as if the tension had not reached its peak already, the back doors opened once more, and a woman entered with composed authority, silver hair, impeccably styled, tailored charcoal suit, sharp eyes scanning the room with practiced calculation. Some in the gallery recognized her, instantly whispering her name under their breath. Victoria Reyes, renowned litigation strategist, absent from public cases for years and before Adrian could process the connection, she walked forward, presenting her credentials to the court calmly, stating that she was entering appearance as counsel for Isabella Reyes, her daughter. The word daughter echoed louder than any objection. Isabella Reyes, not Cole Reyes, the estranged mother. No one expected the legal force hidden behind silence. Adrian felt the ground beneath his confidence crack because the trap was now visible, and it had been set long before he froze a single account. And as Victoria began outlining motions for financial fraud, concealment, and coercive control supported by the very evidence Daniel secured, the courtroom no longer felt like a stage for his victory, but a chamber preparing to witness his unraveling. And for the first time, Adrian understood that the smile Isabella wore at the beginning was never weakness. It was certainty. The courtroom no longer felt like a battlefield. Adrian controlled it, felt like ground slipping beneath his polished shoes. And as Victoria Reyes stood tall beside her daughter, outlining the full scope of financial deception, coercive, asset freezing, psychological manipulation, and deliberate reputation sabotage, the illusion Adrian had built for years began collapsing in real time. She spoke with precision, referencing statutes, case law, forensic audits, and digital authentication, trails connecting shell corporations to Adrian's private authorization keys, each point reinforced by Daniel's secured evidence and certified banking confirmations. Marcus tempted interruption after interruption, but every objection dissolved under documented proof and judicial scrutiny. The judge, now visibly stern, questioned Adrian directly regarding undisclosed offshore holdings, and when asked under oath whether he had intentionally concealed marital assets, Adrian hesitated for the first time. That hesitation louder than any confession. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing as the narrative fully reversed from unstable wife to calculated fraud. Victoria then submitted an emergency motion requesting forensic seizure of all associated corporate accounts pending criminal investigations, citing potential tax evasion, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. The words criminal investigation echoed through the chamber, and Adrian's confident posture finally fractured. His jaw tightened, his breathing sharpened, and the smirk that once defined his expression disappeared entirely. Isabella remained composed, not triumphant, not vindictive, simply steady, as if this moment had been anticipated long before the first divorce filing. She spoke only once more, stating calmly that she never wanted his destruction, only truth, and that truth required patience, something he had mistaken for weakness. The judge reviewed the compiled evidence for several tense minutes before delivering a preliminary ruling freezing Adrian's independent corporate accounts pending federal review, restoring immediate access to all marital assets to Isabella, and ordering a full forensic audit supervised by court-appointed investigators. Gasps filled the room as the reality settled. The powerful entrepreneur was no longer directing the narrative, he was subject to it. And then came the final strike. Victoria revealed recorded communications legally obtained from a financial consultant prepared to testify that Adrian had orchestrated a strategy to bankrupt Isabella, intentionally to pressure her into signing an unfair settlement. Those recordings were authenticated, time-stamped, and impossible to refute. Adrian's defense collapsed entirely. Marcus quietly advised him to remain silent, but silence now offered no protection. The judge announced that the divorce proceedings would continue under revised evaluation, heavily influenced by evidence of financial misconduct, and recommended referral to federal authorities for further examination of fraud charges. The gavel struck, echoing like a closing chapter. Adrian sat frozen. The empire he believed untouchable, now under scrutiny, his carefully crafted image dismantled in a single afternoon. Isabella did not look back at him as she exited the courtroom, flanked not by saviors, but by family, her Navy SEAL brother, disciplined, unwavering, and her estranged mother, brilliant, relentless, no longer distant, but united. And as reporters Flooded the hallway, shouting questions, Isabella paused only briefly and said, "Power, built on deception, always collapses under truth before walking forward into a future no longer defined by fear." And in that moment, it became clear. Her silence had never been surrender, it had been strategy. And the man who thought he had ended her fight had unknowingly authored his own downfall. And only when the courtroom doors closed behind them did Adrian fully understand that the real trial had just begun. Not for her, but for him, and this time he was the one standing alone.